listening to Unpause Your Life with Dr. Cali Estes and Master Coach Jenny Fontana, founders of the Life Coach Method. Each one of our uplifting and deep dive episodes is geared to help you tackle the things that hold you back from having the most magnificent life you deserve. Sit back, relax, and prepare to be coached.
Hey everybody, it's Dr. Cali Estes with Unpause Your Life. I am so excited for our guest today, all the way from Belgium. Matthieu Mehuys is an award-winning author. His book is published, you're gonna love it. And he's passionate landscape architect whose journey from a family in Belgium to regenerative farming practices has led him to believe that landscape architects can indeed change the world. I can't wait to hear about regenerative farming. It's gonna be interesting. His fascination with plants since childhood drove him to become a landscape architect, a role he sees as instrumental in crafting environments that marry aesthetics with positive environmental impact. We're also going to talk about how that revolves into addiction. Through his work, he aims to empower individuals to transform their gardens into spaces that foster biodiversity, restore ecosystems, and reverse climate change. Welcome, Matt.
Hey, Dr. Cali, I'm so excited to be on your show. Thank you for having me here.
You're welcome, all the way from Belgium. I'm excited. So
Yes,
tell
me
me,
too.
what is regenerative farming? Before we even begin, what does that mean? I mean, most of our listeners know how to grow marijuana and probably gardenias, and that's about it. So tell me what that is.
Well, I think to answer that question, we can break down the word regenerative because it's just how it's applied into farming, and it can apply to anything that is in the outside world. So the word regenerative means is to regenerate. So in essence, if we look at natural ecosystems, the way nature works, nature regenerates itself constantly. And even our own bodies regenerate themselves. It's kind of part of the nature of how we are and how our planet functions. But then if we look at how farming has evolved over the last somewhat 100 years, you could argue 150 years, it's become extremely, what is called conventional farming has become extremely industrialized. So we're kind of fighting against nature with farming and even with gardening. We can talk about that as well. I'm also helping people how to be regenerative gardeners. But so looking at how everything has evolved, and we just talked offline about that your president was just elected, and I'm very excited about it because he teamed up with Kennedy, and he's a big advocate of regenerative farming, and he's going to change our country to create a better health, because the way the conventional farming is working, it's using a ton of chemicals that are extremely harmful for the environment, for our personal health. You see it in all the stats. The US has one of the highest rates of cancer, diabetes. So there's some work to be done. So that's like the problem of how conventional farming works. And it's not to blame to farmers, because farmers have been pushed into that direction because of legislation, because of lobbying of chemical companies that are pushing these products into the market. In fact, it's quite funny. It was first introduced, or mainly introduced, after the Second World War, where the warfare industry had excess products like chemical gases, ugly stuff to kill people. They were like, the war's over. They're like, shit, what are we going to do with all these chemicals? And they looked at farming. It's huge surfaces. We can try and sell it to the farmers. And it did have an effect. Like yields were going up, but at the same time, we were destroying the soil, destroying our personal health. So it's going against nature. So what regenerative farming does is the exact opposite. So regenerative farming works with nature. As I said before, nature works in a certain way, and I cover it in my award-winning book, 12 Universal Laws of Nature. So once you start to work with nature, it's not an overnight success, obviously, because we've done quite a lot of damage. But once you start working with nature, you're actually improving the health of the soil. And that's what it all boils down to, is like creating a healthy soil. Then you create healthy plants. And if healthy plants flourish and we eat them, it's going to have a direct impact on our personal health, both physically, and now they also find out that it has a big impact on our mental health.
I was waiting for you to say that part about the mental health because we're seeing, like, for example, let's say we grow spinach, right? And then we dump all these chemicals, these Monsanto chemicals, the DEET chemicals on the spinach, and then it becomes saturated with chemical. So then we eat this and we're seeing higher borderline personality, higher schizophrenia, higher autism. Autism is up by 30%. And everyone is like, oh, well, we don't know what it is. Well, it could be, the plastics, it could be the nanochemicals, it could be how our food is prepared. But I know in Europe, you guys don't have GMO, right? Genetically
No.
modified, genetically bioengineered, that was outlawed. Am I right with that?
Yes, exactly. Well, it was outlawed, but still we have plants that are not genetically modified, but we have plants that have been selected so they can still use a lot of chemicals. We're now getting into a transition which is called the Green Deal in Europe, which is going to take quite a long time, and it's also pissing off farmers because overnight they were like pushed into doing it conventionally and chemically, and they became actually really good at it. And now all of a sudden they have to become ecological and do all the things that are good for the environment, and they have to pay more taxes, and they have to pay more taxes on gas and all this stuff. And so farmers were sick of it. But I'm hopeful that that transition in the US can work better.
I hope so, because we've switched from the GMO branding to bioengineered product, and there was no publicity around it. And I just happen to be in the back end scenes because I work so broadly with mental health. And my first thing is when I'm dealing with somebody with like ADD or ADHD, I tell them come off of sugar, come off of red dye, come off of processed chemical, and come off of bioengineered GMO. And 90% of my clients go, what is bioengineered GMO? I'm like, well, you're not even eating food at this point. You're eating chemical. And you're wondering why you're having these issues and these anger outbursts and the way you feel because you're not eating food. So I have to educate. So I am so grateful for the work you're doing and this podcast today because we have a huge listener base in addiction and mental health. And understanding step one is the food you put in your body changes the chemistry of your body. It changes, and maybe you can speak to some of that on how those changes happen and why you're seeing the way people act in mental health and physical health. So give us some examples of bad food and good food and what's done different for the good food.
So yeah, to answer that, we have to look at the science shows that every 7 years, we are a completely different person from a physical standpoint. Can you imagine that? That's kind of crazy, right? So you 7 years ago, you're physically somebody completely different. So that means that all of your cells regenerate themselves. And that means also if you then look at okay, what is your body consist of? It's mostly water. So also the type of water that you drink is really important. Clean, healthy water. There's lots of tools to get, because most of the tap water is not healthy. Even bottled water is not ideal. So you can get good filters for that. And then the rest of our bodies is literally what we've eaten. Like anything about your body is the product of what you've eaten. So it has a direct impact in your life. And I think an important aspect is the nutrition, but something else that is really important is to, I don't know if you know about blue zones. So blue zones are areas in the world where people live way longer than other areas of the world. It's like in Costa Rica, Japan, Bali. People just live way longer, and they investigated what are like the parameters. Obviously, nutrition and how they eat and community experiences were important, but also a big aspect was gardening. So people have their own little garden, they're working the land. And what the research now also shows is that we are so much linked to the health of the soil. So you might have heard of probiotics, and we need to take probiotics to restore our gut health. Well, if you have your own garden and you're doing a garden that is regenerative, so no chemicals, you're restoring the health of the soil, and you have a healthy soil, And by the way, a healthy soil, when you have 1 teaspoon of healthy soil, it has more microorganisms than there are people on the planet. So if you're struggling with your gut health, I highly recommend you to start gardening ecologically, regeneratively, because what the beautiful thing is, and there it becomes so striking how much we are connected to this planet, is that when you work the land, the soil that is full of these microorganisms, they are very much the same as the ones that are in our gut. And now also all the science and research is pointing that most of the modern diseases are linked to gut health, even mental health. Also that our brain is full of microorganisms that are beneficial for us. So if you eat all the chemicals, your brain health goes drastically down as well. So now imagine you are working in your garden that is full of these beneficial microorganisms, and through your hand. So like I also recommend people when they garden, don't necessarily use gloves unless you have to do like tough work, but get your hands into that soil and your skin can absorb these microorganisms. And then also when you're working the land and you wash your veggies, but you have some residue of these microorganisms because there's so many, you eat that food is full of it. So in that way you can restore your own health. And I'm actually featured in a documentary that's coming up in about a month. That's all about, it's called The Cure, an inside job that's all about healing our planet in a global scale. And I talk about the benefits of gardening. So even if you have a small space, it's important to start to do something just for that connection with the soil, and you'll feel how much it helps you. Like I always say that when you have some problems in your life and you're like doubting stuff, go and work in your garden for a couple minutes, hours between meetings, whatever you're doing, and see how much it will change your how you feel. So I think, yeah, it's wonderful to start to understand how everything is so connected, and how we can create a beautiful planet that is, like, some people argue that should we take care of the environment? Is it not going to be too costly? Well, if you consider that in America, the average spent in a lifetime on healthcare is $200,000. And I think it's even higher, but that's on average. So that means some people are spending in the millions to stay alive. So not to speak if you can't afford it, that's very bad. So even for your, like, even if you're gardening and you think it's more expensive to buy the plants or to even hire a gardener to do it for you if you're busy, well, think about how it's going to affect your health, and you might save like hundreds of thousands of dollars on your healthcare bill.
So let me ask you this, where would we find good soil? Because a lot of stuff in America, you go to Home Depot and it's,
Yes.
basic, but it doesn't seem to work. You have to get all
Yes.
this other stuff to add to it. So where do you find good regenerative soil?
Well, Kali, this is a great question. Thank you for asking that, because that's the key, right? So even if you're starting, and that's a great question, because if you want to start out in your own property, chances are that whoever has managed your property before has been using a lot of chemicals. So I also talk about this, the dark side of the garden and landscape industry, that they are also put, just like in agriculture, they're pushing to use a lot of chemicals. Like most of the lawns across the world are, you don't want to be playing in that lawn. So you have to stop, you have to make sure that your contractors or people that work your land, or even if you're doing it yourself, stop using those chemicals. And already the moment you start using those chemicals, the regeneration process will start on itself, because the microorganisms are spread out in the atmosphere. But the bad news is that if you have like harsh chemicals, that sometimes they can be around for hundreds of years, it's going to take a long time to break it down. So you can actually, but then the good news again is that you can speed up this process. So now you're probably asking, like, how can I speed up this process? And now it gets very interesting how we can actually bring gardeners and farmers together. So what I recommend for people to do that want to start out, Google regenerative farm in your area, do some research and go to those farms, because these people will have the healthiest, richest soil in the world, and very likely they will be producing compost. And that kind of compost that these farmers are producing is from a whole other level. like you say in Home Depot, that's not actually compost. It's just it's burnt soil. It just looks dark because they kind of heat it up so much, and there's not much life in it. So then you go to this farmer and you buy some of his high or his compost that is rich in microorganisms. And what you should do the first time when you buy it, stick your hand in it and smell it, feel how amazing it smells, uh, and then you spread it into your garden. And also the good news is people think like compost, you have to put a big layer to have like a good soil, right? If you have that super high quality, you only need like a couple inches to spread that out into your garden, because it's mostly about an incubator of having all these microorganisms. So it's kind of like the same with the probiotics that are used in healthcare. This high quality compost is like the Kickstarter to improve the health of your soil. And then there's other techniques that I cover in. I have a master class where I teach people online how to design, create, and maintain their own garden. So I cover all of these regenerative practices as well. But also, I also tell people like, do you want to grow vegetables? Yes, okay. Well, make sure you have a couple hours a week to spend time on doing that. And if you're like, no, I don't want to do that, you can still create a garden that is easy to maintain, that is low in maintenance, and that is just a healthy environment. So there's all sorts of ways, even if you don't have much time, to resolve it and to create a healthy environment for you and your family.
So here's a strange question. Let's say I want to grow carrots and I want to grow like lettuce. Do I need different types of soil, or is it the same type of soil, or what's different about different vegetables or flowers for that matter? What
Yeah.
makes what makes the difference?
Another great question. So there's a range of different soil types across the globe, and they're all kind of defined from starting from sandy soil to clay soil. So whatever soil you have some limitations and some benefits for each and every soil type. But again, the beauty is when you start focusing on improving the health of the soil, the amount of variety of plants that you grow increases. So even farmers have done research. They said, and that's also linked to pH level in the soil. Um, there was a common knowledge that you couldn't grow pumpkins in acidic soils. So like because they did farming chemically. So when you do farming chemically, it doesn't work. But if you do farming regeneratively, the science now shows that you can grow as much pumpkins as you like, even in acidic soil, when you have a healthy soil. So it kind of, it's a great question, and you should definitely consider the type of soil that you have. But the good news is, once you start to restore the soil, like you use certain plants that help to restore it, you put the compost in, you can pretty much grow anything.
Oh, this is fascinating. I think it's kind of getting back to where we need to be, because nutrition and food heal disease.
Mhm.
They always have. And in America, we stopped doing that. We're not using nutrition. We're not using food as medicine. Everything is run to the doctor and take a pill. And as a psychologist, I've always said, I don't like the way we diagnose people. You sit in front of me for an hour and you tell me you have up and down moods. And I go, oh, well, you have bipolar disorder. Take this pill. Instead of saying, why do you have up and down moods? What's causing that? And 9 times out of 10, it's a mineral deficiency or it's a toxicity. I just worked on a case where the gentleman was on 26 big pharma medications. 26.
26.
26. And I said, why? And they said, well, he's got PTSD, he's got bipolar, he's got borderline, he's got SARS, he's got mold toxicity. And I stopped and I went, wait a minute, what? And they said he's got mold toxicity. And I said, oh my God, that's why he's got all these diagnoses. Mold in the body will present all these problems. It'll present the neuropathy, and it'll present the body aches, and it'll present as bipolar. And I came in, backwards of all the other doctors. And I said, we need functional medicine. We need a mold detox. And I gave this protocol, and everyone in the room just kind of looked at me like, okay, well, that's different. And I said, well, you're not treating the problem. He's eating Burger King, he's eating McDonald's. and he's drinking Coca-Cola, and you're wondering why he's sick. Like,
Oh my God.
to me, it was a no-brainer. And they're all looking at me going, well, he's bipolar. I'm like, he's bipolar because of his lifestyle choices.
Mm.
And here we are. So let's detox the body from mold. Let's get off this food. Let's get on healthy, nutritious food. So I kind of pioneered that.
Wow.
And that's what I do in my practice is I come from the root cause of the problem. And a lot of psychologists and medical doctors here don't do that. We mask the problem. And here's a pill for that presenting issue instead of saying, why do you feel this way?
Wow, that's amazing that you, as a psychologist, you're looking at it holistically. Because I agree with you, far too often it's like there's a specialist for all kinds of different areas of the body or different diseases, and they're like into a box. Whereas when you look at the body from a holistic standpoint, you can solve so many problems with like only changing diet is like already a huge thing.
Yep. And healing the gut. I think you hit dead on with healing the gut. That's so important. And we overlook that. The gut is the second brain. And we always say, oh, well, it shouldn't matter if you eat McDonald's or Burger King. And I always say that's not even food. That's so highly processed. I know it's different in Europe, but here, they take the chicken and they grind it down and they bleach it and they put these chemicals and these fillers in, and then they lump it all together and it goes through a machine and it comes out like pink slime. So I tell everybody to Google pink slime and they're like, that's what I'm eating. That's what you're eating. It's not even chicken anymore. It's some byproduct. And one day McDonald's will sue me for this, but it's some byproduct
And
garbage.
chicken poop apparently is in it as well. They just grind
Yeah.
the whole chicken with poop and everything.
Well, they're even grinding the little chickens, the baby chickens all up and just mashing it together, and they're still alive. So it's crazy the way our food system is over here. And we say, well, that's healthy. That's not healthy at all. And people, imbibe on that, and then they don't feel good, and they don't understand why they don't feel good. So it's sort of an entanglement over here. So I'm so grateful for the work you're doing and hoping that some Americans kind of get on board and say, let's really get into this movement and let's look at the body as a whole, not just mental health and physical health, but the whole body, everything you're putting in your body from food to sunlight to, the nanochemicals, the forever chemicals in the plastics is getting crazy. We really need to get back to the original, eating from the land and eating healthy. So I appreciate your work. You have your book with you. So if you hold up your book and tell us about it.
So it's 12 universal laws of nature, how to get the most potential out of your land. So it really talks about, it's targeted at both farmers, landowners, gardeners, people. If you even have a balcony, you can get started. So it's really about, okay, I have something, a property. How can I now use this land to its best potential? So it ranges also by, we're adding property value to like curb appeal from a real estate standpoint, but then we're also, because we're doing it in a regenerative way, and as it turns out, the benefits are endless. Like you can reduce maintenance, so many amazing things that happen from it. And yeah, it all starts with the universal laws of nature. So just to give you my backstory, when I was 3 years old, I grew up on a farm myself. My brother and my father are farmers here in Belgium, and I dearly respect them for them. And I've also helped them to transition into the regenerative space. So, but when I was 3 years old, I was so fascinated about seeds. Like, how the hell on earth can you have a tiny seed, you put it in the soil, grows into a full plant, in some cases even a huge oak tree that's over thousands of years. Can you, like, I was just mind blown at the age of 3. So already there, my path was kind of, or my journey has started. And then when I was 5 years old, I started gardening, growing my own vegetables, and I had some early success with radishes. So whenever you want to start out with all the listeners that are listening here, if you want to start growing your own veg, buy some radish seeds. You can get them in many shops. Put them in your balcony or in your backyard. A couple of weeks down the line, you'll have something to eat that's fresh and healthy. So that's the easy one, and I had a huge success. And then I thought, wow, gardening is so easy as a 5-year-old. And then I said, okay, now I'm going to get salads, carrots, all this other stuff. And I just started seeding everything I got like a little patch of a garden from my parents. I just started spreading the seeds, and I was like, now I'm done. I'm just going to come back in a couple of weeks. It's going to be full of lush, fresh vegetables. And I think, Cali, you already feel what's coming next. So I came back after a couple of weeks, maybe a holiday with at my cousin's place or something, thinking like, I'm excited to see my garden. I come back full overgrown by weeds, because even me and my grandmother had put in some compost to add some nutrients to the soil, but it was like full of nasty weeds that were higher than myself. And I was devastated. I couldn't understand it. Like, why doesn't nature provide me with all the food? And from that day onwards, I said, okay, I want to understand how nature works. Because even as a kid, when I had like toys of my sister, I would always have to open them and break them to see how does it work inside. So then I dedicated my life to understanding how nature works. And after like, I'd say, yeah, now I'm 30 years later down the line, that okay, I started to understand how it works. So I've synthesized this in these 12 universal laws of nature. And then when you understand them, you can become way more successful at gardening and at anything you want to achieve in an outdoor space.
That's awesome. So tell our listeners how they can find you. Where are you besides I'm assuming you're on Amazon. What's your
Yes.
website? Things like that. Send them to your location. So if you want to learn more about gardening or more about regenerative gardening, they can come to you.
Yes. So what people can do, there's a couple things. So if you feel like I don't have the time, but I'm willing to invest in it, then you can contact me directly in my Instagram account. We can put that in the show notes. When people feel like, okay, I kind of have time and I also want to invest and I want to start learning about gardening, then they can go to my website. That is the website for my masterclass, which is called www.gardenofyourdreams. So gardenofyourdreams.com. And they can get a free 30-minute training. I've put together some teasers of what I'm teaching, so you get to know what I do and some knowledge that you can apply immediately in your garden. And then from there, if they want to find out more, everything is there on the website. And then my book you can find on Amazon, as you already said. I'm on LinkedIn, Facebook. So if you Google my name, you'll find me.
And we'll put all that in there. So when we put the podcast up and the videos up, we'll put your Instagram, your LinkedIn, your website, your podcast, your free masterclass. All of that will be available, so the listeners can just click it and go right to you. Very simply.
Yes.
So I ask everybody at the end of the show, what's one piece of advice you would give our listeners?
Great question. So whenever you have an idea or an urge to do something and you can feel that it's been inside you for a long time, just start. And even if you don't know exactly what it is, just start with something. Just do it. Just get after it. And as you go and you progress in your career or in whatever you want to do or become, you'll see that the path becomes clearer and clearer as you go.
Awesome. Well, thank everybody for tuning in. This has been another great episode of Unpause Your Life with my guest, Matt from Belgium. And again, if you're interested in regenerative gardening, we will put everything up for you in the show notes and through social. Have a great day, guys.
You are listening to Unpause Your Life with Dr. Cali Estes and Master Coach Jenny Fontana, founders of the Life Coach Method. Each one of our uplifting and deep dive episodes is geared to help you tackle the things that hold you back from having the most magnificent life you deserve. Sit back, relax, and prepare to be coached.